Hello everyone! So today's book is Mansfield Park, which I finally just got done with a few minutes ago. It's a fairly long book, probably not quite as big as Emma was, but it's really hard for me to get through 412 pages over the school, while I'm trying to do school at the same time. So, anyway, I finally got done with it. And Mansfield Park by Jane Austen is, I really liked it, but here's the deal. It's split into two pretty neat sections. So the first section is the part that I can talk about easily without really spoiling anything, but the second section is where things get really interesting, and a lot of the characters are really developed, and you start to see all the things that were set up in the first half come to fruition in the second half, which is a really clever setup, I think, for Jane Austen. She just kind of introduces all the characters in the first portion and then makes everything happen in the second portion, but you don't really see what's coming, which is really great. So here's what I'm going to do. This first portion I'm going to talk about, and then I'm going to kind of have a little break where I say, okay, now I'm going to talk about the second portion. And if you don't want any spoilery type things, then just don't watch the second portion of that review. But there will be enough in this first portion to see if you want to read it. So basically, Mansfield Park stars this girl. Her name is Fanny, and she is very kind of timid. What happened is her mom married not very well. They were a rich family, and she married not very well. So her mom was kind of an outcast, and so her aunt and uncle live in a very nice place called Mansfield Park. And sometime when Fanny is around 10, they invite her to come live with them at Mansfield Park. And so she hasn't been back since. She's probably about 18 when the book begins. And so anyway, she's living there, and in the past 8 years or so that she's been living there, a lot of dynamics have built up. There is her uncle and her aunt, both of whom are kind of like, they don't really care much about her. There's like a spinster aunt. I'm pretty sure she's a spinster. The two aunts kind of get confused in my brain and just kind of meld into one. And then we have the four cousins, who are, aunt and uncle's children, and Fanny's cousins. So we have the oldest is named Tom. Tom is like an older guy. He's probably like 24 when the book starts out. He's pretty flighty. He's kind of self-centered. He doesn't really pay much attention to the family, and he's not very into the whole I'm the carrier of the family name sort of thing. I have to do everything right. He's not into that. Edmund is the second oldest. Edmund is a kind of more steady kind of guy. He wants to be a pastor. He wants to have his own, whatever they called it in England, where you have your own parish and you take care of that. He wants to do all of that stuff, and he's a lot more steady, a lot more kind, and he is actually the only one of the cousins that really befriends Fanny. And then we have two sisters, one named Maria and one named Julia. Both of them are kind of silly and also kind of flighty, and they are pretty self-centered, and basically, especially in the younger years, you get a sense that they kind of bossed Fanny around and kind of just told her, you're not as good as us. And the aunts also are very careful to make sure that Fanny knows that she is not as good as they are. They are on two separate levels. They may be living in the same house, but they are completely different in the way that they are supposed to live and the society that they are expected to enter later on in life. That's a big deal at the very beginning of the book. So anyway, but the deal is that Fanny has fallen in love with Edmund because Edmund, again, is the only one who takes time to befriend Fanny, the only one who treats her well, the only one who treats her as an equal. And so she has kind of fallen in love with him. But in the first half of this book, Fanny is very self-contained. She doesn't really have much agency in her own story. She's just kind of there witnessing all of the events that take place. One of the events that takes place is the arrival of the Crawfords. They are a brother and sister who are living with the parson or something. Anyway, Mary is a very she seems nice and fairly intelligent. She's extremely outspoken about her feelings and her ideas, and she captures the heart of Edmund. He really likes Mary, and they have this whole thing where they're like, do we want to get together or not? Because Edmund is kind of aware that she has some different ideas, and she doesn't really like the clergy, and he's big on he's going to be in the clergy and all that stuff. And then we have a brother named Henry, and Henry is very flirtatious, and he likes to, it's evident that he likes to make eyes and have flirty interactions with almost every woman that he comes in contact with, and so he undertakes to make both of the sisters fall in love with him, which he does very successfully, and the older one, Maria, is supposed to be engaged to another guy, and yet he's still able to make this whole flirty romantic thing go on, but then he leaves them later on, which isn't really a spoiler. You kind of see that coming. But anyway, and so that's kind of the beginning of the book. You get introduced to all these characters. The thing that is really great about this first section and continuing on is it really feels like you are getting to know these people gradually. There's not any just like character dump. It's like you're like Fanny. You're just viewing all of this, and you are kind of taking little bits of information to start to understand who these characters are and what they're like, and you're not quite sure if your own judgments are correct. I think that's very realistic to how the real world is. You see these people and you take little bits of information, and you're like, you start putting them together, and you're like, I mean, this is the way I think this person is, but I'm not really sure if that person is that way. And that's the brilliance of splitting this book into two, is you get all those pieces the first half of the book, and then the second half of the book is kind of when you really get to fully understand who these characters are, and your original feelings about the characters are either confirmed or denied, which really makes it a lot of fun. However, it's not like a fast-paced romance book. As you may have noticed, this first half has little to no romance whatsoever, and the second half really doesn't either. So if you're expecting a Jane Austen Pride and Prejudice deal where there's like passion and love and fireworks, there's not any of that, and there's not even a kiss in the entire book as a whole. It's not a romance per se, so much as like a quiet introspection and just looking at characters and like character piece. It's very good. It's very fun to read. For that reason, I think, if you are into characters the way I am. But anyway, so that is the first half. And now I will tell you that if you do not want things spoiled, then you should stop now. And, okay, have you stopped? Alright, I'm going to do the second half now. Okay, so the second half really begins when Henry Crawford decides that he is, and I may be reading into this, but I really think that he is annoyed that Fanny is not paying any attention to him. It's sort of, there's this leading up to it where people start recognizing how good Fanny is, and how she's beautiful, and how she has a lot of thought and merit, and how she really takes care of the people around her. They start to appreciate her more, and as it leads up into that, I think is when Henry starts to say, hey, this girl is important, and I haven't tried to seduce her yet. This is a problem. I need to seduce her right now. And he tells this to his sister, and she's like, oh yeah, you should totally do that. And anyway, so he starts doing that, and as he does, he kind of starts to actually have feelings for her, maybe. Henry is a confusing character because you're never really sure of his motivations. You're never really sure if he actually likes these girls that he's trying to seduce, or if he is just, you know, trying to make himself feel better by, you know, boost his ego by, look, all these girls want me. But anyway, so you get that whole fiasco, and the great thing is that Fanny at this point is starting to take more agency. She's starting to feel more comfortable in her own skin, and she tells him flat out and tells everybody who really wants her to marry Henry, because Henry's rich, she's like, no, I don't think that he's a good person. I've seen all this bad stuff about him. I don't want to marry him. And people are really upset about that, including Edmund, which really hurts her. At the same time, we're starting to get some more information about Mary and who she is, and at this point, Fanny actually is like on again, off again friends with her, which doesn't make much sense to me because Fanny the whole time seems to have a very pointed dislike for Mary, but sometimes she likes her and sometimes she doesn't. I wasn't quite sure about that, but I guess, again, that's very realistic. There are people in our lives who are like, they're okay, but then we're like, but they're kind of not okay. So it's like, I'm not sure. And this whole time, also, Edmund and Mary are trying really hard to get together, which is another realistic thing where they're like, I'm not sure about you, I don't know, it's really, it's a really realistic type thing, which I appreciate and I like a lot. But now I need to talk about the ending, which, again, spoilers if you don't want to get spoiled for the ending, which happens in the last 40 or so pages of the book. So anyway, what ends up happening is, first of all, I love how Jane Austen makes Tom, the oldest brother, fall down or something and get hurt, and people think maybe he will die. And that is just such a play on that cliche of older brother dying and younger brother inheriting, and, you know, then all of a sudden the two people who wanted to get together can get together, and that whole thing that happens at the end of a lot of novels from this time. She pretends like she's going to go that way, and then it doesn't work out, and Tom's fine. But that happening is important because it shows Mary ends up sending a letter to Fanny that says, oh, this is so exciting, you know, maybe then Edmund will get to inherit, and then we can live happily ever after, he and I can get married. And just the raw selfishness of that really shows you what kind of character Mary is, and really just totally takes the veil off of everyone's eyes. And so Jane Austen uses that so cleverly because it's important. Like, it's not just a red herring, but it is a red herring, and so that's so much fun. So that's the first thing that happens, and then Henry Crawford and Maria Bertram, that's the older sister who's married, run away together. Just like, whatever, they go away. And so again, Fanny was totally right about him, which is so satisfying, so nice when you get that and you're like, so finally everyone's going to get off her case, and finally everyone is going to realize that she is smart and does have good insight into people. And so that is really satisfying because you know the whole time that Henry is just a terrible person. So anyway, that happens, and then Julia runs off, and it's just a big, sudden burst of everything going wrong at once, which is again very realistic, I think, because it does seem like when it rains it pours. And so this all happens in the last 40 pages of the book, and really kind of gives a nice like, it's it doesn't feel forced. Like, you would think that all of this suddenly happening would feel forced, but it doesn't. It feels like finally everything is culminating. Finally, all of these people who you thought the whole time were not what they seemed, finally it's all coming out. Finally it's all catching up to them, and it's satisfying in a strange way, to get that closure and to finally be sure of who these people are. And then the last thing there is to talk about is that Fanny and Edmund do end up getting together. I'd be interested, if you have read this, what you think about that. I appreciate that Jane didn't spend very much time on it. It kind of just was like an epilogue tag ending at the end of the book, like, oh, they just get together, which I think is fitting for the characters, because we do get a lot, like, we don't need to see how they fell in love, because they were already so close to begin with. But I don't know. I find it a little strange because they did grow up like brother and sister, and then one thing it says in the epilogue, because I just read it, it was like, and it was so easy for that brother-sister affection to turn into romantic love, and it's like, it wasn't really though. That doesn't seem like a thing that would be easy, but I guess Fanny was already there, but Edmund wasn't at all, and it's just like, I don't know. The romance wasn't really, their romance wasn't at all the point of the book, which is another reason that I appreciate that it's kind of like a tag ending thing, because that was not the point of the book at all. This book is not really a romance novel. Again, it's a book about people and getting to know someone, and how those first impressions are important, and how a lot of times the information that you gather about people is real. And so I appreciated it a lot for those reasons. I really liked Mansfield Park, definitely better than Emma, and I don't know how it will stack up eventually on compared to all the other Jane Austen novels, but I will be interested to see how that all works out. So that is my review of Mansfield Park. Next book that I'm going to read will be Prince Caspian, which hopefully I can get through by the end of this Thanksgiving week. So I'll see y'all soon. Bye!